campaign. Stay with us there.
Welcome to France 2022 The Choice, our daily show covering the presidential elections. Only 5 days to go before round one this Sunday, and this Tuesday was a strange day with both finalists vanishing for the trail. Why? They have a crucial debate coming up between them on Wednesday night in primetime. So instead of shaking hands, instead of snapping selfies, they are doing their homework. Here's the recap of this strange day with Shirley Sitbon.
The presidential debate. For some, it's the beginning of their rise to power. For others, a dead end. Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron have taken a step back to prepare. Their number twos and various allies have replaced them on the media field. Le Pen's goal? Not making the same mistakes as her first debate 5 years ago.
Il y avait un axe stratégique qui, je crois, avait été choisi, qui n'avait pas été le bon. Marine Le Pen souhaitait montrer qui était Emmanuel Macron, le démasquer, alors qu'en fait, on attendait d'elle plutôt qu'elle montre qui elle était elle-même et ses propres arguments. C'est exactement ce qu'on attend d'un débat présidentiel, de vision de la société, de projet, savoir où on nous emmène et comment on nous y emmène.
Emmanuel Macron is getting prepared with his closest advisors, too. Unlike their first debate, this time Macron is a sitting president. Le Pen intends to grill him on some of his weak spots. Meanwhile, for Team Macron, Le Pen is a danger in disguise.
Je la vois apparaître avec ses chats, vous voyez, pour se rendre aimable et sympathique. Et ça me rappelle une fable qui s'appelle le chat, la belette et le petit lapin. Ce chat, il est tout doux, tout gentil. Et quand ce pauvre petit lapin et cette pauvre belette arrivent jusqu'à lui, il les croque, il les mange. Bon, eh bien, c'est ça. Derrière Marine, il y a toujours un Le Pen. Il faut quand même le rappeler.
Le Pen was attacked on her plan to redevelop French defense companies by breaking up partnerships with their German counterparts.
Entendre une candidate à l'élection présidentielle vous dire dans le fond cette amitié franco-allemande, moi je veux la remettre en question, elle ne remet pas simplement en question cette amitié, elle remet en question un héritage, elle remet en question ce qui est désormais une part de l'identité nationale française. C'est tout simplement une folie.
That is all from the campaign trail. Meet again tomorrow, same time, same place.
Okay, well, let's take a look and see what the pollsters are telling us at this stage. Mark, what have you got for us?
Yes, our partner Ipsos Soprasteria is telling us that Macron is supposed to garner 56.5% versus 43.5%, so a 13% lead. That's doubled since round one last Sunday. That's, by the way, still much lower than in 2017, where Macron won 66% of the votes. But the first week has been a good week for the incumbent. Obviously, still a few days to go before round two.
Okay, Mark, for the first time since the first round, the leader of the far-left party, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who managed to win 22% of votes in the first round, has been speaking today. What's he been saying?
Well, obviously, people were waiting to see what he would say to his voters. What should they do on the second round next Sunday? Let's take a listen to Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
What's my political responsibility? It's not to preach in the desert. It's to convince and keep united a bloc of 11 million people, maybe 12 or 13 million. The biggest political force in the country. Its unity is my political responsibility. But they're divided on this question, and I don't understand why I would tell them, do this, choose this one or that one. I tell them, don't vote for her. Vote what you want, but don't abstain. Be a character in your own life.
Okay, the far-left leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, speaking there. Well, Marine Le Pen has been adamant that she's going to campaign on bread-and-butter issues, and she's very much touting her social programme, isn't she?
Absolutely, that's what she's been doing since the campaign began. And our reporters Julie Dangueroff and Claire Paquin went to the northern region of the Hauts-de-France, where the far-right leader won big in round one. And they met with locals in the town of Abscon to find out why they're convinced by the far-right candidate and how confident they're feeling about the second round this coming Sunday.
Fire is ingredient number 1.
I was down.
Place. It's not clear who was reports.
Blood on the streets of Kabul. Explosives detonated near this school as children were leaving their morning classes. Several people are dead and children are among the injured.
We are close to the school. I quickly came to the site when the first blast happened to see if everything was okay. I went to the top of my house to see what was going on. There was a crowd of people over there. I was standing on the roof of my house and called my children to enter the home. Suddenly, the second blast happened and I got injured.
The victims are members of the Hazara, a Shia minority group. Their community and this neighborhood have previously been targets of ISIL attacks. The governing Taliban says the security situation is under control, but analysts warn that violence may be on the rise.
The most important thing that we have to talk about, we have to consider, is the fragile nature of the security. It can easily be disrupted, it can easily be put in danger, as we have seen today. So therefore, I think a lot has to be done on the part of the Taliban to provide a full-fledged security to the entire population of Afghanistan. But it is going to be impossible for them, because if you see the economic hardship, the disenfranchisement, and the public discontent that is going with every passing day, all those things combined together, I think it's going to be very difficult for them.
Back at the school, security forces arrived to seal off the area. The Taliban has been cracking down armed groups since it came to power in August. But this latest attack is a reminder that security remains one of its biggest challenges. Vincent Monaghan, Al Jazeera.
Well, Hassan Abbas is a professor at the National Defense University and author of The Taliban Revival. He joins us from Washington, D.C. by Skype. So the Hazara Shia Dasht-e-Barchi neighborhood in Kabul has seen some of the deadliest attacks in the city, but we've also seen attacks elsewhere in other provinces in recent months, places like Kunduz and Kandahar. Most of these have been claimed by the group ISKP. Is the violence against this community escalating?
Yes, it is escalating, as there is evidence for that. And you can imagine in this month of Ramadan, a month of peace, blessings and spirituality, and those who act in such fashion, this explains the nature of their motivation, the nature of their worldview, and that they ordinary Afghanistan by Taliban. Tajiks should go to Tajikistan, Uzbeks should go to Uzbekistan, and Hazaras should go to graveyard. That was their slogan. We know of what they did the last time. This time around, to give them some credit, they had said they will defend the minorities, including non-Muslim minorities, Hindus and Sikhs, they had said. There was only one Jew who left, so they tried to keep him as well. But in case of the Shia Muslims, who, as you rightly mentioned in the introduction, there are large minority, a big ethnic group. They had promised them that they will provide security on Ashura commemoration and other places, but they are failing to do so, clearly. I mean, Kabul is their heartland in terms of their power center. They know where are the Shia majority or Hazara community living in that area. It's not that hard. It means there's something seriously wrong in terms of Taliban's security policy. I mean, they have been on Twitter every day. I was watching them showing their forces being trained. You would see they are very well trained, proper uniform, equipment. But at the end of the day, if they can't secure the areas which they know is being targeted by ISK, then there is something seriously wrong in how Taliban are perceiving or Taliban are thinking about living up to their promises.
What about the way in which the international community and even the way these stories are reported by the media? Why is there sometimes a reluctance to recognize and expose the systematic targeting of this group?
It's a great point, because this is the same thing is happening in Hazara community in Pakistan's Kuwait also. We have seen regular attacks. In this case specifically, I think, to be fair, ordinary Afghans, irrespective of their religious inclinations, are being targeted. We know what Taliban are oppressing anyone who will raise their raise their concerns, or among the media elsewhere. But the Hazara Shia community has been a tragic case, because from an ethnic point of view, they can make a case for the international community. They've been doing their bit by giving chances of political asylum, but then those are rare cases. I think this is a worldwide problem. Minorities from all different religious groups across the world. We know about what happened with Rohingya in Bangladesh. We know of other communities, Kurds also, Shias, even though in majority in Iraq, what happened in Syria, elsewhere. The international human rights organizations, I think, need to be more focused, or should be able to project these cases more effectively. I think that's where there's a gap, irrespective of what they say. You Google now reports, you'll find many reports. But when it comes to policy, I think those who lack support, those who are weak, hardly anyone is ready to stand by them. That's an international problem of very serious nature.
Professor Hassan Abbas, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, police in Sri Lanka have used live ammunition against protesters blocking a highway, killing 1 person and injuring 19. It's the first death of a protester during weeks of demonstrations demanding the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Opposition MPs are calling for a no-confidence vote just a day after the president appointed a new cabinet. Sri Lanka is struggling with its worst economic crisis, which has led to power cuts and shortages of food, fuel and medicine.
The economy is going down, and the security of the country and the health system is in great danger. So what we need is the basic facilities for our people, and they were very poor in the country for past 70 years after independence. So this is an innocent protest to protect our poor people.
Jahan Pereira is the executive director of the National Peace Council of Sri Lanka and says there's a risk of further escalation if the government cracks down more on these protests.
I think it is very essential that people should see that the government is responsive to what they are demanding. And what they're demanding is no less than the head of the president and the prime minister, both Rajapaksas, who are presently holding those positions. I think that if we are to diffuse this crisis, but not to really solve it, but at least to diffuse it, the president should step down. There are people now blockading the roads and the railway tracks because there is no fuel for them. And there's violence now that recently this is spreading throughout the country, now different parts of the country. So something has to be done. And what we are really concerned is that the government might try to even crack down using the military. We are hopeful that this will not happen, because that will only aggravate the problem.
Well, now talks are taking place between top US and South Korean diplomats after a series of missile tests by North Korea. The US Special Envoy for North Korea says Washington and Seoul have agreed on the need for a strong and unified response. There's concern Pyongyang could conduct a nuclear test quite soon. The US and South Korea are urging the North to return to the talks.
It is extremely important for the United Nations Security Council to send a clear signal to the DPRK that we will not accept its escalatory tests as normal. Also agreed on the need to maintain the strongest possible joint deterrent capability on the peninsula. And as Ambassador No mentioned, this is why our militaries are exercising and training together, like the exercise that started just today. I want to underline that we have not closed the door on diplomacy with the DPRK. And I once again call on Pyongyang to pursue a diplomatic path with us. We remain prepared to meet with anywhere without any conditions. Also want to make clear that we have no hostile intent towards the DPRK.
There have been protests against joint military exercises with the US outside South Korea's foreign ministry. Demonstrators called for an end to what they say are coercive policies against North Korea. Protesters insist sanctions won't solve the nuclear issue on the Korean peninsula. Much more still ahead for you this hour. We look at why China's deal with a tiny Pacific island nation is raising fears from Australia all the way to the United States. Hundreds are dead and millions without water in South Africa. The government declares an emergency after last week's devastating floods. And in sport, we hear from world champion boxer Tyson Fury before his title defense at Wembley Stadium.
Hello, the weather's looking, well, hotter in Scandinavia than Spain over the next couple of days. We've got lots of sunshine into central and northern parts of Europe. We've got an area of low pressure bringing some very disturbed weather just around that western side of the Mediterranean into Spain and Portugal. It's quite an active low, this. Big waves coming into that eastern side of Spain. Some snow over the mountains, yeah, cold enough for snow. Madrid, temperatures at around 12 Celsius in the cloud and the rain. Further north, well, Oslo, 18 degrees, 13 Celsius there for Stockholm. And it stays pleasantly warm as we go on into Thursday. Notice some wet weather still there across eastern parts of the Mediterranean. That wetter weather that we do have across central parts of Europe, pushing across the Med, easing away from Spain, so things will gradually start to cheer up. Fine and dry by this stage up towards the northwest, not too bad. London at around 15 degrees Celsius. Fine and dry across northeastern parts of Africa. Some lively showers there up towards the northwest, and those showers lingering just around the Gulf of Guinea. Some very heavy showers coming back here. Meanwhile, I'm pleased to say we have got dry weather for that eastern side of South Africa, with wetter weather making its way into Mozambique.
The climate has changed every year for millions of years.
Decades of talk, but little action.
It's all about distraction, create confusion, to create smoke and mirrors.
The shocking truth about how the climate debate has been systematically subverted.
The oil industry was a main bankroller for opposition to climate action.
The campaign against the climate.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
More CO2 in the atmosphere is a good thing.
Absolutely.
On Al Jazeera.
Radicalism is on the rise across the globe.
We're told it's everywhere. We're told we're supposed to be highly suspicious of everybody and everything.
But are government policies aimed at tackling radicalisation, in fact, pushing youngsters to the fringes of society?
The impact is you don't belong here. There's only so much of you can take before you say, okay, that's me.
Welcome back. A look at the main stories now. US President Joe Biden says his country will be sending more artillery to Ukraine as the war moves into a new phase. What's being labelled the Battle of Donbass. Thousands of Russian troops have been deployed to the region, and Ukraine says the city of Crimea has been seized by Russian forces. At least 15 people were killed when bombs exploded in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. Another 30 people were injured. The three blasts targeted schools in a Hazara Shia neighborhood in West Kabul. Police in Sri Lanka have used live ammunition against protesters blocking a highway, killing one person and injuring 19. It's the first death of a protester in weeks of demonstrations demanding the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Well, in other news, the International Monetary Fund is saying the war in Ukraine is driving an economic downturn across the world. It's slashed its global growth forecast by almost 3 percentage points for this year. Shab Ratansi reports now.
The IMF's projections for the world economy have worsened significantly since its last report in January, when it predicted a post-pandemic recovery. The reason is clear.
Global economic prospects have been severely set back, largely because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This crisis unfolds as the global economy has not yet fully recovered from the pandemic.
From an estimated 6.1% in 2021, the IMF now says economic growth will shrink to 3.6% in 2022 and 2023. The fund says that inflation, already surging due to the pandemic, will be amplified due to war-related supply shortages. And its World Economic Outlook says increases in food and fuel prices could lead to social unrest. However, the IMF also said inflation for advanced economies may fall to 2.5% next year. Some economists say that should mean a change in course to prevent a devastating global recession.
Threatening to do what it's done many times before, which is to increase interest rates unnecessarily.
And more supply bottlenecks in Oxfam has released a study in 2022. The charity is calling on the developing world what recovery there is.
The managing director has said that the suffocating force of austerity should not be in Europe. But we don't see the same in developing countries and in poorer countries.
Oxfam says there's a disconnect between the IMF's research, which discusses increased social unrest and more hunger because of the pandemic and the war, and the IMF's actual policy prescriptions for the most needy nations, which demand the slashing of the social safety net, ending subsidies on cooking gas, increasing taxes on food, and freezing public sector pay. Shia Bertansi, Al Jazeera, Washington.
One of the world's youngest countries is about to get a new president. Voters in East Timor are choosing between a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a former guerrilla fighter who blame each other for years of political paralysis. Whoever wins will take office for 5 years from the 20th of May. There's also the 20th anniversary of East Timor's independence from Indonesia, which brutally occupied the former Portuguese colony for 24 years. The transition to democracy hasn't been smooth. The World Bank estimates 42% of the 1.3 million strong population lives in poverty. Corruption is also rife, and the pandemic promising to change all that. Frontrunner José Ramos Horta, who is in 1996 for his efforts towards ending the conflict in East Timor. The man he hopes to unseat, current President Francisco Luolo Guterres. The former rebel leader has vowed to ensure national stability. Jessica Washington now reports.
As Asia's youngest country goes to the polls, old rivals face off once again in the final round of presidential elections. People's quality of life.
I want a prosperous economy. We'll try not to incur unnecessary debt except to improve people's lives.
In March, 16 candidates contested round 1 of the elections. Guterres won only 22% of the votes, while his opponent, Nobel laureate José Ramos Horta, got nearly half. Politics in East Timor, also known as Timor-Leste, is dominated by older men who are respected for their roles in the country's fight for independence from Indonesian occupation. Both candidates are from a generation of what are widely viewed as revolutionary heroes, who now make up the political elite. They competed in elections in 2007 too, which Ramos Horta won.
There's a lot of respect for the older politicians, there's a lot of respect for the resistance generation and the veterans. But people are asking the question, how long can this generation dominate politics in Timor-Leste?
As he cast his own ballot, Ramos Horta said he would prioritize building regional ties.
On the foreign policy front, absolute priority is our ASEAN membership.
Around 40% of people in East Timor live in poverty. As people queued in the sun waiting to have their say, many are hoping for solutions to high unemployment and improvements to healthcare and education. Political stability is on the minds of many voters too. A long-standing rivalry between the two major parties has created a political deadlock that prevented the government passing a budget.
I hope that no one will forget their promises made during the campaign. We will have to keep reminding them so those promises are well implemented in the community.
Some analysts say the growing number of young voters are getting tired of the political dramas of the past being continually dredged up. And that's putting them off supporting the two biggest parties, CNRT and Fretilin.
I don't think they see themselves represented in their agendas. And I think that's something that both CNRT and Fretilin are struggling with the representation of young people.
For now, voters have a choice between two candidates. Both played important roles in their nation's past and hope they will too in its future. Jessica Washington, Al Jazeera.
Now, Western powers have criticized China after Beijing said it had signed a security pact with the Solomon Islands. The US, Australia and New Zealand are worried about growing Chinese influence in a region that's traditionally under their sway. They say it could destabilize the islands, bringing Chinese warships within 2,000 kilometers of the Australian coast. Andrew Chappell reports.
A new security arrangement for the Pacific that's caught many by surprise. China has signed a cooperation agreement with the Solomon Islands, one that Western governments believe could bring Chinese warships uncomfortably close to Australia's shores. The agreement is to maintain social order, protect lives and property, respond to natural disasters, and provide humanitarian aid. China's foreign ministry rejects notions the islands are in Australia's so-called backyard.
Pacific Island countries are not anyone's backyard, let alone pawns in a geopolitical confrontation. Island countries have actual needs for diversification of foreign cooperation and also have the right to independently choose their partners. Deliberately exaggerating tensions and provoking confrontation between camps is not of interest to island countries.
News of the agreement sent shockwaves around the world when it was leaked last month. And just hours before it was announced, the U.S. warned against it,